My name is Dee Williams, and I work with a company called Portland Alternative Dwellings. I've been helping with PAD, or Portland Alternative Dwellings, for about, 14 years now. And in the past, we've taught workshops, we've got some how-to books and stuff like that. So what I wanted to do today is fly by the seat of my pants and offer you guys some of the stuff that has been it's been a huge education for me over the years. And it may be stuff that you guys already know and could probably speak to more articulately than I can, but I'm going to go for it and just offer what I can. This is more technical stuff. I'm not going to necessarily talk about my story or me. Because that's like, yawn. So let me go ahead and get started on these slides. So the photo you guys, the big photo that you guys, just ignore the ribbon on the side. Just ignore that. Don't read ahead in the book. That's the first house I built in 2004. I built it myself over about 3 months. It cost me $10,000, and that was everything from the solar electric system to super expensive low-E argon insulated windows. And a trailer, which, those three things, the solar electric, the trailer, and the windows, was a little over half my budget. So when you think about it, the real, the framing, the siding, the beauty of the house itself, how it took shape, that was less than $5,000. And I lived in this house for 13 years. I loved this house. And I learned a lot about the systems as I was living there. And then as I've gone on to build other tiny houses and help other folks kind of build. So let me see what kind of questions I'm getting so far. Okay, I'm gonna go for it here. Let's see if I can figure out how to make this advance. Can it advance? Let me see. Hang on, you guys. Patience, people, patience. Am I gonna be able to do this? Well, maybe I go like this. Nope. No. Okay. Hang on one sec. Anybody have any ideas? Maybe I need to get a lifeline here. I'm going to try this. Can you guys still see the slides? I'm going to pop back and forth a little bit. Just let me know. Sorry, technical difficulties. Patience, kind. Okay. I hope you can still see. I'm going to try it this way. So I'm gonna speak, and then I'm gonna pop out for a second and make sure you guys just send me a message if you can't see the slides advancing. So what I wanted to start on talking about, if you guys don't mind, is talking about solar electric stuff and just a couple of tips to put in your back pocket. The first one is working with somebody that can help you calculate how much electricity you need. If you're going to go with an alternative like wind, hydro, or solar, just sit down with somebody. There are online calculators you can use. We work with a company, PAD works with a company called Wholesale Solar. They have an online calculator. They also have packages that you can use for tiny houses, small cabins, vans, any of those other kind of smaller conversions. Okay, I'm going to pop back over and see if there's any, seeing the slides advancing. Woohoo! Psych! Okay, next thing. So a lot of the smaller solar electric systems that I've seen, it's just a couple of watertight plastic tubs, and you put the components like the inverter, which is the black thing on the left photo, that little black kind of, it's about a hand-sized inverter. There are a couple of relays in there. There'll be a controller that will take the electricity out of the panels and direct it into the batteries without overheating the batteries or overcharging the batteries, and then meter it out into your house. And this system is all designed based on need. It's a tiny house about the same size as mine, owned by, it used to be owned by Tammy Strobel, who has a website called rowdykittens.com. On the right side, it's just a couple of lead acid batteries that were used. And again, we want to keep those things separate. You don't want the components for your solar electric system shoved into the same kind of watertight, airtight container, those batteries are going to off gas sulfuric acid, and you'll end up heating up the components and blow the lid right off this thing. So don't do that. Next thing, solar panels. Again, the number of solar panels you're going to need is dependent on who manufactured them. The panels on your left were manufactured by Solar World. And the components on the right, this was in my tiny house. This was my solar electric system. So I had a huge 170-pound closed cell battery, gel cell battery, so it wouldn't off gas. And then the white thing on the left side of that kind of picture is the inverter. And back in the back, there are two little green dots that you can see. That's the controller. And then I had a couple of fuses that I used. So I had a redundant system in my house, which allowed me to be able to plug in with an extension cord if I didn't want to take my panels with me if I was traveling, and charge the battery that way, or run off the solar panels. The other thing, just to kind of have in the back of your mind, is the orientation of where your van or house or yurt or container is going to be, and whether or not it makes more sense to mount the panels separately from that structure if you don't have kind of the right orientation of the roof. It gives you a lot more flexibility, and it's a lot easier to change the orientation for the seasons. So just a heads up on that one. I'm going to flip back and just make sure nobody's saying that I'm full of crap yet. Just wanted to know. And Fink, I'm not sure what you wanted to know. So let me go through the questions later. Okay, I'm popping back. Let me talk about water systems. This diagram is something I've used in workshops, and the idea is to kind of get folks to start thinking about water in, water out. What do you need water for? In the first house that I built and lived in for 13 years, I carried water into the house in a big 2-gallon jug and then collected the gray water out of the kitchen sink. That was the only water I used. I collected that in a big jar underneath the sink, and then it's gray water, so I poured it in the garden. I used a composting toilet to avoid water and holding tanks and stuff like that. So just start to think about systems design, and it'll play back into how you design the space inside your house. And those systems end up being critical as far as having flexibility if you're going to move a lot, or if you're stationary. You can start to kind of dream and scheme about that stuff. There's tons of resources out there on how to design these systems and where to go online for those things. Yesterday, I offered to send folks a copy of a little kind of how-to ebook that I wrote some years ago called Go House Go. And if you'd like a copy of that, just email me at d@padtinyhouses.com and I'll get you a copy of it. But it's got tons of resources on water systems. One of the things that a lot of people want to do is have an on-demand hot water system instead of using a tank system. So as you guys might know, you can get a little RV 5-gallon, 8-gallon holding tank. You can flip a switch and heat the water up and then use it for a shower or something. An on-demand system kind of gives you permission to use as much water as you want and heat it up as you're using it. So water pressure is driven through a series of typically copper tubing. It heats the water up and then delivers it. But again, remember, water in, water out. So you want to have a little tiny bathtub. Remember, you got to find a place for all of that gray water that comes out of the tub. Can't just dump it on the ground. You got to figure out an appropriate system. One thing that I just saw, this was actually just a couple days ago, my husband showed it to me, is this little orange pump that you can set into a bucket, and then it supplies really good water pressure for an hour. I just ordered one. I want to experiment with it. They're about $50. But you could conceivably heat water up on your stove, pour it into a bucket, take that bucket outside, and give yourself a nice outdoor shower with this continuous pumping system. The pump recharges. It's got a little battery in there. It recharges using a USB port. So stay tuned, because I'm kind of excited about giving that thing a go. One other thing about water, if you're in a cold climate, remember things are going to freeze. If you've been in a house with frozen pipes, you know what a pain in the neck that is. Typically, folks get water supplied to their out structure, whether it's a tiny house or a van or something like that, with a hose, and you can just heat tape it. Go to an RV store, they can sell you a little bit of heat tape that you can put along that. I recommend minimizing the amount of exposed hose. So, you can bury a pipe to a spigot and then have a short run of hose into the structure. That thing that's circled, if you guys aren't familiar with that, there's a blue garden hose going into a blue filter. And that blue garden hose is something you can get at an RV place. It's for potable water, drinking water. So it doesn't have the phthalates or other chemicals that can come off a regular garden hose. The filter is primarily designed to filter out, heaven forbid there are any organics or metals in the delivery system. But the real problem, especially with an on-demand hot water system, is minerals, the mineral salts. And those on an on-demand system are going to gunk up the copper tubing in a hurry. So you need to have a filter, not just for, the way, for ingesting water, but for protecting the equipment. Those on-demand systems, typically, if you get like a small RV system, they last about maybe 3 years of day-to-day use. If you get a regular, like a Ream hot water on-demand system, those will typically last about 10 years, maybe longer. But the real critical point is that blue filter that you see there. Coming out of the blue filter is a little black dial. That's a regulator. And on-demand systems are really finicky about the water pressure going through them. So you need to look at the manufacturer's recommendations on water pressure. And then keep in mind, if you're in the city, typically the water coming out of a spigot outside is between 20 and 80 PSI. So most recently, I worked with Ben Garrett at Tiny Healthy Homes up in BC. He had a client down in Portland. And I worked with the client. The client couldn't get the hot water heater to work. And we put a filter and a regulator in line into the tiny house, and then essentially just played with the regulator until we got the proper flow into that on-demand system. That regulator is going to be also really important if you're out in the country, maybe on well water. Typically those systems, even a gravity-fed system, you're not going to get enough PSI through the system to really drive the water past the copper coils to heat up. So in those cases, I've recommended installing a little holding tank prior to, with a pump in it. That pump is going to, you fill up the holding tank with whatever pressure you get from the well or gravity system. And then you boost up the pressure through either a regulator or a pump. The little black, or I guess it's kind of a copper colored stub past that regulator going into the house, that's a water tamper. And what that helps with is essentially keeping the pipes inside your tiny house from knocking. In a regular house, there's a little water tamper behind each valve, like underneath your bathroom sink, underneath the kitchen sink, in the wall. You can't necessarily see it, but it keeps the pipes from rattling. So I recommend that. One last thing, this is a picture of a tiny house that Pad built years ago called the Sweet Pea. And it has a kitchen sink and a bathtub and a shower. Those things drain into a common discharge pipe, which then under the house, which then goes into a filter, an in-ground dry well. And these pipes weren't found with the Sweet Pea and aren't associated with the Sweet Pea. But I wanted to give you guys a caution. If you're running pipes underneath a structure that is open to having rats or other critters crawl under and start to chew on things, these black pipes are the ABS black pipe for sewer. We're actually under the house I'm living in now, and Olympia, Washington, where I live, we're rat city. We're right on the water, so we have lots of rats, and they decided to munch into the pipes and had a day with them. So beware. And by the way, just a heads up, if anybody's interested in the sweet pea, go to Pad's website. That tiny house is for sale right now, if you're interested. Okay, moving a tiny house. Some of the biggest questions I've gotten is, how do you deal with crossing state lines? Typically, if you and think about this, if you go on a road trip, you don't check in with DMVs across the country. In the state where you start, you would go into the DMV to get your license plate. That would go, on, if they're calling it a trailer, and it's a DIY tiny house stapled on top of that, or a cargo container strapped onto a flatbed trailer. You get that trailer license, and that works for you going across state lines. The thing to pay attention to in moving a tiny house is that there are underpasses, overpasses, bridges, tree limbs, power lines. And so typically the height restriction is 13.5 feet, 8.5 feet wide. You can go a little bit wider, but you have to get a trip permit, and I can give you all kinds of more information about that if you want to email me. It's also in Go House Go. So again, my email is d@padtinyhouses.com. Some of the other stuff to think about, what I tell folks is to double check the tires. If the structure's been sitting on the tires for a while, you may want to pop them off. This is my tiny house, and we moved it from Olympia, Washington to Colorado a few years ago. I gave it to my nephew, and I jacked the house up, popped the tires off. The house had been sitting on it for, probably 6 years without moving. I didn't rotate the tires. I probably should have. There's a whole maintenance thing that you can do, and that's available online if you go through an RV website, on how to maintain those tires, dealing with UV protection and stuff like that. So I popped the tires off, rolled those tires into a tire store, bought 4 new tires, brought them back, popped them on the house, and then drove the entire house down to the tire place, which was kind of cool. They really liked it, and it was kind of fun. It was quite an adventure. And they checked the lights, the brakes, the axle, they checked the tires, and then gave me an instruction sheet on what to do in the first 100 miles that I was driving down the road, and then at 1,000 miles, just to double check that the tires and everything were looking good on the road. So there's tons of great information out there. If you need more specific information, let me know. See what else? Oh, I shutter the windows. So see that little sign on the tiny house that says Pad? That's a big slab of walnut that a friend of mine etched with our logo on it. But I figured if we were going to get rocks or chips at the back of the house, that's where it was going to happen. The windows on the side, I also shuttered. And then there's a loft window at the front end of the house. So what you guys are seeing is the back of the house. The opposite end, up in the little gable end, is another window. So I shuttered that, just to prevent rock dings and stuff like that. I didn't install what do they call it? The breakaway windows. Typically on a house, if you have a sliding glass door, you have to put that kind of glass in that's kind of shatterproof. Your car windows are shatterproof. Super expensive windows for a tiny house. So I just used regular windows and never had a problem as I was moving the house. Didn't have a problem moving from Olympia to Colorado and then Colorado to Wyoming. Everything was just fine. Let me move on. I'm just going to flip over and see if everybody, it's called safety glass. Thank you, we three. Ding dong, I couldn't remember. Okay, it looks like folks can still hear and see. So I wanted to run through a couple, we're running out of time. We got about 10 minutes, but I wanted to go through some design ideas. And later on, Matt Impola, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, is talking about space. So I'm going to mention that a little bit. We've got Zyle from Abel Zyle. I know him as Abel Zimmerman. From Zyle Vardos, he's going to speak. He's an amazing designer. And Jay Schaefer is going to speak later today. Of course, the godfather of amazing small structure designs. So I encourage you to take a look at that if you're interested in tiny house design. This is a tiny house in Australia. It's a cargo container, 2 cargo containers put together. The challenge with cargo containers is you guys might imagine, is heat buildup and cold, and which can both cause a problem with condensation inside the structure. So their solution was to do an awning, and I just think it's beautiful. It really changes the form, and it addresses some of the material science that you have to look at, the building science that you have to look at if in cold and in hot environments. So as far as design goes, if you guys have been playing around with designing your own structures or designing for other people, this is kind of the design process as I've discovered it. A friend of mine, Kate, introduced me to this. You know, it's like this feeling when you start out, it's awesome. You know, this weekend you're learning a lot. It's awesome. And then all of a sudden you get stumped by something. And for me, it was how much space do I need to have inside my tiny house to accommodate the solar electric components and battery? Because the battery has to stay warm. You know, how many windows should I really put in the house? How do I prevent condensation or moisture buildup when I'm cooking a lot? You know, so then you hit, you know, this is tricky. So it goes from awesome to tricky to all of a sudden you're just like overwhelmed and you feel like it's just a pile of crap. And then, of course, you internalize that and you feel like you are a piece of crap. And then you know, through the grace of your friends and community and stubbornness and a good heart, you start to think that maybe you can make your way out of it and then come back to it's awesome. And that, for me anyway, that creative process cycles over and over and over again, not only while you're designing, but while you're living in it. You know, my tiny house experiences, I've been successful in dialing things in about 80%. A good solid B average is the functionality of a tiny house for me, and I feel like that's elegant design. The other 20%, it's too small, or oh gosh, I thought the storage area was going to be perfect, but I've actually got way more storage than I possibly need. Or I don't have good internet pickup where I've parked. That creative process and problem solving continues on after you design and after you move into a space. So be gentle with yourself and surround yourself with awesome friends. As far as kind of the components of design, there are so many awesome books out there, and I encourage you to share those resources with each other. If you found a design build book that you like, share those. One of the most critical things is balance, I think, in symmetry. For me, it's even if it's asymmetrical. Abel Zimmerman, his Zylvardos that he designs, he's got amazing curves and a lot of asymmetry going on, and it creates a sense of balance. Same with, you know, coming up with the design where you've got mirror images, or if you think about the radial design that you see in the head of a sunflower, you know, this perfect logarithmic spiral that you see in a conch shell. These things all play into how kind of a visceral reaction to balance. And again, there are tons of resources out there for that. Color, texture, and pattern. This is kind of a fisheye view of my kitchen. And some of the stuff that I wanted that was really important in designing and building this was to have kind of a common color code, if you will, so that I didn't have a lot of hot colors bouncing out at me. I thought that if it was so small, this was a theory, something so small, big colors might make it feel smaller. Same with having like the rafters when you walk into the house. These are the rafters or the joists for the floor, the loft floor. So I wanted those joists or rafters, which depending on which way you're looking at them, I wanted those to be evenly spaced and open. And the thing that did is you walk in and your eye or your sensibilities kind of go up and then they drop down with the joist up and then down and then up and then down. And that creates kind of an accordion accordion effect. So you end up creating space or the sense of space simply by that pattern. And it actually really did work out that way. And I had people all the time walk into my house. It's the size of an area rug in a normal big house, size of an elevator, very small space. And somehow almost everybody that walked into it felt that it was bigger than it was. So I recommend that. Scale and proportion. The cool thing about building your own house or designing for somebody else is the invitation to design it around their body. So as an example, these are two stools that I made. The one on the right, I essentially sat down on a piece of wood and drew around my butt. That's the top of it. And the height was kind of what was comfortable for me, which is about 18 inches off the floor. I'm short. The stool on the left was something that I designed for Kelly, my husband, and it's taller because he's taller. He's 6'2". I'm 5'5". So you get an opportunity to size things according to you if you're building it yourself. There are codes if you're building something to code that restrict, like the height of a countertop. The depth of a countertop is typically 2 feet. The height off the floor that the outlets need to be, and the light switches there. That sense of scale is dictated a lot more by code if you're following that. But if you're building it for yourself, you have a little more latitude. This is a good example. That's Abel on the right of Zalvardo's. That tub works for him. I think he's like 6'1" maybe. That would be, I think my head or my neck would hit right at the lip of that thing, of that cattle trough. But it works for him. This shower on the left is Christopher and Melissa Tack's tiny house. And that's a wine barrel at the bottom, and that shower worked out fine for them. Couple more things, and then I'll open it up for questions. Details, be mindful in a small space, what's going to make your eye pop. Windows, critical and beautiful. You have an opportunity to make them beautiful. Openings, bringing light in can create a sense of space. Storage, being creative about how you use storage and where you put it in a toe kick. I've done that in a lot of houses. It's a super secret, special, hidden spot. And then ultimately with design, making sure that you're considering building science and, looking at moisture control, particularly around areas that are metal. So around the wheel wells and stuff like that. And then more than anything else, like I said before, be kind and gentle to yourself. And surround yourself with really knowledgeable friends who you can treat to a beer or coffee or pizza or many deep thanks, and have them help you build your house. So let me flip this over to some questions. Anybody got some questions for me that they want to throw out there? I'm ready. Lay it on me. I got a thank you. Thank you. We three. A few years back, I swear you said we could go a bit wider than 8.5. You sure can. So the question was, how wide can you go? You can go up to 10 feet without having to get, a trailer car and a lead car and a licensed driver and all of that. 10 feet wide is the maximum. And that's measured down at the base. So at the height of the trailer, if you're building on a trailer, not at the eaves. So it's a weird thing. We've checked in with ODOT, the Oregon and Washington DOT, and it's cool. If you go wider than between 8.5 feet and 10 feet, you may have to get a trip permit, which is about $30. So it's easy to do. Let me see what some of these any other resources that you can recommend. This is a question from Taylor. Yeah, all kinds of resources out there. I have to be honest, my go-to is Go House Go, and I'm happy to send that out to folks. It has a bunch of hyperlinks in it. It's an ebook to other resources on green building, plumbing, RV maintenance, which essentially is kind of a lot of the systems. So if you want that, shoot me an email at d@padtinyhouses.com. Show slide 21 again. This one? Hang on. I'm going to pop out. This one. Okay, so this is something that was developed by my friend Kate. And I'm happy to send this out to folks. Kate has been generous enough to let us use it. And her primary focus was on moisture control, dealing with vented versus unvented roofs. The building science is back and forth on that. My rule of thumb for an unvented roof is if you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. But I guess you could say the same thing for a vented roof. So anyway, I'm happy to send that to folks too if you need it. See, thoughts on the best way to heat or cool kids' walled lofts? Oh gosh, that's a really long conversation, but I'm happy to send you Go Husko because we talk about it in there. And it hyperlinks to a bunch of other resources on that. Great question though. Metal framing, how would you deal with metal framing and moisture control? You know what? I haven't built anything using metal framing, so there are tons of folks out there, and I think there was somebody that was going to talk about this, and maybe it's Jason and Zach. I think they've built with aluminum or steel, so I would defer to them as far as moisture control and potential condensation when things get cold or hot. Jay Leopold. For metal framing. Somebody chatted in on that. What else? Anybody? Oh, we're almost out of time. Hey, here's some of the things I didn't talk about, but I think you guys should start thinking about if you haven't already. Toilets. Oh, yes. Number one in the number two business. Gray water. What are you going to do with it? Water in, water out. Code. That is a long conversation. Cole Peterson, I don't know if he's talked. He's going to talk about Caravan, the tiny house hotel down in Portland, and code and how he navigated that. And he just came out with, what's it called? Redesign. He's got a great book out there, and I could go pick it up, but I'm running out of time here. J. Leopold Thin House. They, for metal framing. J. Leopold Thin House. And that's house, Haus. Cole is talking today. Yes, he is. He's awesome. And Lindsay, thanks for chiming in here. She also knows a ton. I was going to say shit ton, but we're not supposed to cuss about code stuff. Okay, you guys, finding a builder. I'm not the best resource for that, to tell you the truth. Workshops. If we get enough interest in them, we're happy to throw them. And I think this venue, doing it this way, is actually really cool. And I really love that we're able to figure out interaction. That's something I was nervous about. Lindsay wanted to know if I'm the godmother of tiny homes. That just makes me feel old and that I should be a lot smarter than I am. You know, I don't have children for a reason. Bad. Hope this was helpful, you guys. Enjoy the rest of the weekend and shoot me an email. Go to our website at padtinyhouses.com if there's anything we can offer, as long as it isn't a kidney or a lung, because mine are old. They are. Blessings. Take care, you guys. Have fun.